I'm Vance Bastion here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 45, a Friday interview. We'll be talking with Dr. Richard D. Mohr and diving into his book all about a loving, wonderful couple. It is titled The Splendid Disarray of Beauty. Get to know our guest. Dr. Richard D. Mohr is an academically trained author with extensive journalistic experience and literary flair. He publishes books in three widely diverse fields: ancient Greek metaphysics, American ceramics, and gay studies, along with queer theory, focusing on ethical, social, political, and legal issues. His book, Gay Ideas, Outing, and Other Controversies, was banned in Canada and won the 1992 Lambda Literary Awards Editor's Choice Award. The chapter on gay marriage in his book, A More Perfect Union, in its treatment of privacy laws and understanding of what marriage is, lay the conceptual groundwork for the Supreme Court's 2015 gay marriage ruling. He and his hubby of 45 years live in Urbana, Illinois, and we're here to discuss that recent book, The Splendid Disarray of Beauty, The Boys, the Tiles, The Joy of Cathedral Oaks, a study in arts and crafts community. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, and it's great to have the opportunity to bat some ideas around.
Woohoo! So let's first delve into what put you on your creative path. I mean, it sounds like a lifelong exploration of three very interesting and diverse subjects, but you brought them together. Where did that
What
start?
what launched me into writing on gay issues was an intercession class. So this is 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks in 1981. So over 40 years ago, the first ever course on gay issues at the University of Illinois. It
Nice.
was incredibly intense. There were warring factions in the class. There were practically fistfights the first day. The class had 9 black football players in it, and a third of the class was gay men, and a third of the class was straight women, and nobody was getting along with anybody. So 3 weeks later, I had to keep my life going. And so I wrote about it to get it out of my mind and into the world. And this issued in a humorous article called Gay Studies in the Big Ten, a Survivor's Manual. And it was published both in a teaching journal, an academic journal, and also in Christopher Street. Remember the
Yeah.
magazine?
Oh yeah.
That was kind of tried to be the gay New Yorker. Well, it appeared there too. And then it appeared in a chapter in, can I plug a book?
Yeah.
Sure.
My first gay book, Gay Justice, a study of ethics, society, and law, which was about gays' relationship to society and gave basic arguments for gay rights. And then it was on to the other books that you mentioned. So that's how I got jump started. It was therapy.
Wow, that's pretty intense, though.
I'm amazed that you could just say 3 weeks later there wasn't
Yeah.
a war zone.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the Splendid Disarray of Beauty and specifically the men entailed therein.
Yeah, the book is about two San Francisco Bay Area artisans named Frank Ingerson and George Dennison. And they were a couple in life and love for 55 years, all of them before the Stonewall era, from 1910 until 1910 to 1966. They their career in design glittered across 2 continents, but they had a home base in the eastern foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we're talking 50 miles southeast of San Francisco, 15 miles southwest of San Jose, just sort of uphill from what's now we know as Silicon Valley. And they built their house called House, Studio, and School, Cathedral Oaks. They had many famous friends from Hollywood, from the arts, from the business world, and their friends and their community referred to them as the boys. The local newspaper, the Las Gatas Times, 40 years into their relationship, reports that they're as familiar and comfortable in the community as a pair of old shoes. So they're a couple of sweeties, sort of the shock of the ordinary. In this, though, they sort of provide a inspiring model in their coupledom and their social engagement. Just by being themselves, they were able to achieve all the things in life worth having: freedom, beauty, truth, love, or so the movie Moulin Rouge would have it. In addition, through even the toughest times for gays in America, like the McCarthy era, they were leading lives of dignity and joy. So this was quite an interesting story for me to discover. That's the sort
Wow.
of basic outline.
How did you
So,
happen upon these two? I mean, seems like, it's almost a serendipity to it. Was there?
Exactly. It's very much through the back door. They had a school for 4 years from 1911 to 1914 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And one of the things they made there was art tiles. So these are tiles that you would have in a fireplace surround, or maybe in a backsplash, or an accent in a bathroom. And some people became interested in those. And so there was a little bit of research about them in 1990. So they died in 1966 and 1968. And it was through that very back door that I got interested in them. I write in ceramics, so I had heard about these tiles and these men. Before my book, the only thing that had been published on them was a 6-page article on their tiles that didn't go into their relationship at all. So, yes, serendipity for sure.
so was the school the element that brought people to them initially?
Um, the school's main function in their relationship was as a honeymoon project. They had hitched up just the year before in 1910. Okay.
Hmm.
And very quickly fell in love. Um, I'm afraid that Frank was a bit of a homewrecker. George had been in a 10-year relationship with another man when he finally hooked up with George. They met initially in 1905 at the Portland World's Fair. George was running for the state of California, basically what we would now call the Chamber of Commerce. He
Mm.
was their chief operations officer, and also presented the state of California, represented their interests and buildings at a whole string of World's Fair. So he was there in this capacity as a business manager, and Frank was there looking for a place to move his studio from Chicago and its horrible winters to the West Coast. So they first meet in 1905, but it might have been love at first sight, but it wasn't bonding at first sight. And then it was 5 years later in 1909 that they meet at the Seattle World's Fair. And then it's very quickly bonding. By the spring of the next year, they bought 35 acres in the Santa Cruz Mountains with the view of setting up a school. Frank, at that point, had been teaching at what is now the San Francisco Art Institute, teaching art, applied craft and art there. Unfortunately, the San Francisco Art Institute died last year, so now it's the late great San Francisco Art
Oh.
Institute. So he was a teacher, and George was the manager of this school. So in their relationship, it functioned as their honeymoon project. Also, sociologists have found that in long-term, just cut me off if I'm chattering too long. Sociologists have found there's a great book from 1984 called The Male Couple by David McWhirter. Found that in long-term gay relationships, typically there's a sort of third partner, a third element on beyond the two men themselves, something beyond simply maintaining a household. And this third thing sort of reduces stresses and sort of centripetal pressures that one finds in small families. And that was it for them. This was a sort of third element that was helped them bond together. And there would be examples of that later in their life as well. So, but the people at their school were it was a summers only art school, and it was the first of its kind in California. And almost all of the people there were not rich and famous. They were school teachers and art administrators taking what we would now call in-service training. Okay. The wealthy, famous people would come a little bit later.
So let's follow that timeline. How did
Oh,
they meet the wealthy people?
well, three of the most famous people they knew were Olivia de Havilland and her co-Academy Award winning sister, Joan Fontaine. They happened to go to the Los Gatos High School. So more serendipity.
Hmm.
In fact, it was the boys who, in each case, literally drove them to Hollywood, took them from their house to Hollywood for their big breakthroughs.
Wow.
In each case, it was a play. They each of them performed in a play and then immediately was picked up by the movie industry. And in Fontaine's case, it was actually the boys that made the connection. They both knew this. She's not as famous now as she was, May Robson. She had a long, distinguished career on Broadway. And then when Hollywood had needed the sort of savvy old lady role, she went to Hollywood and became a star there. And she also produced plays. And she wrote a letter to them saying, "We need an ingenue. Do you have an ingenue?" Aha, we have this good friend, Joan Fontaine. How would you like to meet her? And so they were the direct cause of Joan Fontaine making it in Hollywood.
Wow.
So, and with Olivia de Havilland, they drove her to Hollywood. They set her up in a hotel, but it was more like a studio apartment.
Mm.
But they didn't have her. They made sure she was settled in, and then they stayed with their friends. And a few days later, they had dinner together for Frank's birthday, and they remained friends through their entire lives. Yehudi Menuhin. So one of the he's actually from San Francisco. People knew it, the famous child prodigy. So they met him in Paris in 1927, and there the connection was quite extraordinary. So there's a wealthy patroness of the arts in San Francisco named Cora Koshland. Well, she's paying for Yehudi Menuhin, age 11, to take violin lessons in Paris with the composer George Enesco. She's also funding the new Reformed temple that's going up in San Francisco, Temple Emmanuel. This is big as a cathedral. And the core element in the temple is a Ark of the Covenant. And she commissions the boys to do that.
Oh,
This is
wow.
a 9 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot brass object. It's like a jewel box, and it's studded all over with enameling in imitation of rubies and emeralds, and that it has a gilt interior that Frank did. And so she introduces the 11-year-old Yehudi Menuhin to the boys. The boys take him to the Louvre for the first time. This so, and then 6 years later, Yehudi Menuhin gets his parents to buy the estate that wraps around the boys' property, sort of almost literally embracing them.
Hmm.
So that's just how they met three of their famous friends.
All right. Now, you had said that There was just the one article in the Los Gatos paper and then the 6 page on the tiles. How did you
Oh no, oh
research?
no, oh no. They were in the newspaper. In the last decades of their life, they were in the local newspaper almost every week.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
So I was wondering how you research them, but that's starting to make a little more
well,
sense.
when the initial research was done on them in the early 90s, the internet didn't exist.
True.
Okay. Now we have newspapers.com, we have ancestries.com, and this just opened up a whole world for them. So we have lots of information about their last decades, much less information about their early years. There, the inferential gaps are a little bit bigger, but altogether, a surprisingly complete story. Things that are missing. There was a diary maintained by George that's quoted in an autobiography that was written about Yehudi Menuhin in 1955. Where is it?
Hmm.
That would be very revealing about the internal dynamics of their relationship.
Right.
There's a play that Frank wrote called For George.
Oh.
And yeah, and it doesn't exist. And we know nothing about it. So there's a feature article about it in the San Francisco Chronicle. So Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine's mother, Lillian de Havilland, who was also in the 40s a Hollywood star in her own right, did a dramatic reading of it to a women's club. But you know how papers are. This is the social column. And you just have lists and lists of names, not a single word about what is in the play.
Oh man.
So, and another thing is we don't have any letters between them.
Hmm.
Okay. And maybe there weren't any. So when they got together in 1910, they were hardly ever out of each other's sight after that. So maybe there weren't any letters, but that would be very revelatory too if per accident those showed up someplace. The
Right.
So there turned out to be a surprisingly robust source of archival materials for them. One thing, Frank in his old age was desperately trying to establish some sort of legacy for them. I mean, they never did anything as splashy as their famous friends.
Hmm.
And he tried to get a museum, local museum, to set up a room that would reproduce their living room. That didn't go anywhere. One successful thing he did is he sent a packet of letters to them from their famous friends to the Bancroft Library at Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley. So that's a real treasure trove of people writing letters to them.
Hmm.
There's one from Olivia de Havilland in 1955. It's written 5 days before she gets married to Pierre Gallant, the editor of Paris Match. And it's just like this love. They had sent their congratulations to her. She writes back, this most authentic love letter I've ever read. I mean, it's
Oh.
it's gushing and yet has substance. I don't know how anybody can do that.
Wow.
So Frank is desperately trying to put together some sort of legacy. It doesn't really work. So since their work was basically in the decorative arts rather than painting or sculptures, uh, after their deaths, it was sort of treated like antiques.
Hmm.
Uh, Yehudi Menuhin was their executor and what's the word? Residual legatee. That's it. That's the guy who ends up with everything after everything else has been parceled out. And he basically sold most of the stuff through an antique store.
Hmm.
Okay, so lots of the things that they made are simply lost. And then, since they never achieved the international stardom of the people that they hung out with, they too, after their deaths, sort of vanish. So this project is an attempt to restore them from starlessness.
Got
Well,
it.
it's interesting too, because I wonder is there any kind of indication that they also moved within the subculture of gay culture at the time? Because I mean, we just did a review of Billy Haynes, who
Oh,
was a silent star who then became the designer, interior designer to the
right,
stars
right.
kind of thing. And it just makes you wonder if these men had a way of networking within themselves, because I think what's one of the things that really amazes me about the couple you're talking about and Billy Haynes likewise is the fact that they also existed through the McCarthy era, and they pretty much came out unscathed. I'm imagining, because I don't think that we have much in the way of the McCarthy era affecting them, do we?
There's we got two questions going
Yeah,
here.
no,
Let
no.
me
Elaborate.
McCarthy era. I have only found a single instance of homophobia rearing its ugly head in their case, and it's really ugly. It's basically the accusation that gay men are child molesters. Here's how it goes. In 1955, there was a review of this biography of Yehudi Menuhin. In it, the reviewer says, well, the boys were a major factor in his education, in his growing up. And this local San Francisco Bay Area music critic says that's absolutely wrong. The senior Menuhins were such fabulous and moral people, they would never let Yehudi Menuhin hang out with people like that. I mean, it's all coded, but it's absolutely clear. All gay men are child molesters. A moral parent would never let their child associate with them. Bingo. And the editor of the newspaper that ran this letter had a note at the top saying people are going to find this letter controversial. Okay. But nothing became of it. As far as I can tell, there was no response, no reverberations, no whatever. 2 years on, 1957, the same newspaper is asking the boys how they met. Now, what's the very first question you ask after you realize that a couple is a couple? Okay, or a serious couple. It's
Right.
how did you meet? So the newspaper is performatively treating them as a gay couple. Okay. On the other hand, a few years on, the same newspaper is more or less gay baiting Ruth St. Denis, who was another friend of the boys. She was visiting the boys. Ruth St. Denis was one of the founders of modern dance, so right up there with Martha Graham, who studied with her. She's visiting Los Gatos, and the Los Gatos paper is gay baiting her. She had lived separately from her husband, Ted Shawn, who was also a dancer, and they had a dance troupe. But they hadn't lived together for years and years and years. And the newspaper asks, can the fact that they have different dance careers explain their separation? So, in other words, it's practically asking, are you queer? And Ruth St. Denis understands what's being asked, and she simply says, next summer, Ted and I are celebrating our 50th anniversary at Jacob's Pillow. So she uses the fact that she's in this technically legally married as a closeting device. Okay. This is not something that the boys ever did. My view of their relation to the public is that their relationship, I call it transparent. Not that they were open in the sense that they didn't draw attention to themselves. They didn't dye their hair rainbow colors or wear a badge. And they probably would not have been involved in even in the few political activities that were going on in California pre-Stonewall. They, in fact, hadn't, I have a good authority that they had no religious beliefs and no political beliefs that were articulated to anyone. They were, though, part of a gay network. Two of their closest friends that lived in nearby Saratoga. It's only about 5 miles from Los Gatos. Maud Megler and Carolyn Smiley. They published a magazine called World Youth. This was a leftist magazine that featured writings by young people around the world, and it had this utopian vision that if we just get children around the world to understand each other, there will be peace and harmony everywhere. Okay. And they were very good friends with this couple. They were somewhat less open, less transparent than the boys were. I'm almost certain that they knew Emil Norman and Brooks Clement. Have you heard of these guys? They were in Monterey. Emil Norman was the first American to use plastic as a high art medium. And in the 40s in New York, he and Brooks Clement were totally closeted. I mean, systematically so. But then when they moved to the Bay Area, they shifted to the boys model. And they said, we didn't wear badges, we didn't go out and with signs, but we were made it quite clear that we were a couple and just let the chips fall where they might. In Frank's desperate attempt to establish a legacy, there's this line that he tried to establish some sort of museum or something exhibit in Monterey with the fellows down there. So that's exactly where these two people were. So I'm almost certainly that they knew those people. They get it. You may not have heard of her, Lottie Lehman, but she was an opera diva in Europe in the 20s, sort of the equivalent of Leontine Price or someone like that. She lived in Santa Barbara. And she writes a letter to them saying, you know, all of these Black people. There are no Black people in Los Gatos that I'm aware of. I was there recently. But she says, you have this group of Black friends, clearly implying Black gay friends. And she gave music scholarships to people, and one was to a Black male, and she says, he doesn't know anybody. Can you hook him up with people? So they were also a sort of node with the Black community. Frank has a short story in which a Black male is a major character. So yeah, they were, even though they weren't political in any way, they were deeply engaged in society and clearly were operating with a gay crew, let's call it that.
Nice. So in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you if there's anything else about the book you want readers to know before we move on to our get to know you questions.
Even though it's written by somebody with a PhD and published with a university press, it's quite readable.
Nice.
It's nice to remove that academic layer and say, no, this is approachable. Come read my book.
Perfect. All right, Baz, take it away.
All right. So in this year of wow, what one word describes your favorite food?
Anything that my hubby cooks.
Oh, there you go.
Good answer.
Can't get any better than that. There you go. All right. Your favorite entertainment genre?
I like experimental movies from the 50s and 60s and early a modernist classical music, so atonal music from the 20s and 30s.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Is that too
Where are
is that too eggheady?
no, no, no. I'm right there with you. Lately, I've had a penchant for finding queer kind of movies of the silent era. I like finding those, so I fully understand. I
do you,
follow you.
do you like Fireworks by Kenneth Anger? Have you ever
Oh
seen
no,
it?
I haven't checked. Oh, I do know of it. I have not seen it or found it. So I will have to definitely look that up.
Check it out.
Yes. All right. Well, where are you on the spectrum of mundane versus magical?
Well, I think Atoms in the Void can be interesting without appealing to magical thinking or mythical creatures. I think there's a lot out there in the world that's wonderful and wonder causing. I think if I had gone into sciences rather than the humanities, it would have been astrophysics and or quantum mechanics. I mean, those just seem big and wonderful.
That's what my husband's in, is quantum mechanics. He used to work for JPL
Wow.
and NASA. So yeah. So I literally live with a rocket scientist. It's really tough watching sci-fi movies with him. All right. Your preferred level of PDA.
Well, that's set by my hubby. He's not into holding hands in public, but then in our 70s, would look pretty ridiculous. Anyway, we do smooch at airports, though.
Oh, but there you go.
Awesome.
There you go. Uh-huh. The environment where you relax the most.
We like going to rustic lodges in the national parks and forests, sort
Oh,
of
nice.
masculine places in masculine spaces, sort of.
Oh, well, you're going to make a girl blush. Okay. Well, your preferred beverage.
Single malt scotches, especially peaty and smoky,
Wow.
Okay.
Amberg or Lafroy.
Okay. Where do you fall on the scale of youthful naivete versus the wisdom of experience?
I'm always curious about everything. We'll always try something once, and hopefully I'm not completely jaded, though a lot of people think I am.
I often say my mom is over 80 and adolescent, so there's still room. There's still room. All right. Well, your favorite fictional character.
Ooh, well, it's a toss-up between Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights and
Mm,
Mowgli from the Jungle Books. So Heathcliff
okay.
is dark, brooding, and not quite
Opposite ends of the
cruel,
spectrum.
critical. And Mowgli is this sort of delightful, enchanted, and enchanting boy out there in nature.
Well, there's your youthful naivete versus the wisdom of experience, right there.
These things link together.
Mhm.
There you go. And finally, your favorite mode of travel.
Of late, road trips. Road trips are fun because you pick a few places you definitely want to go to and then run into by accident all sorts of interesting things along the way. So we've been doing regional road trips. We used to do our summer vacations in the Arctic. We've been we've been
Wow.
to we've been to Greenland 5 times.
Oh, wow.
But the hubby's having some mobility issues, so automobile works better than
Yeah.
landing on a rocky shore in a Zodiac. Wow.
Excellent. Well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Mhm.
Yay.
So, what's up next for you? Are you doing any book tours? Are you writing something new?
I've done my book tours. So in June I did a 6 city tour of the West Coast, and then I just 2 weeks ago I was back in San Francisco for another gig on the book. And then I'm trying to decide what to do next. I have 3 projects on the stocks. One of them might be to do another book on the boys. The current book focuses on their early years when they had this school in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I just give much briefer account of the rest of their lives. But there's certainly a book's worth of material to write a twin biography of them, and in which the school and the tiles would barely be mentioned. And I fingers crossed. I'd like to try to do that for a trade press. But there are also academic presses that are really interested in this area. The University of Chicago Press has published several books on gay couples. So I think it'll find a home someplace.
Excellent.
Perfect. All right. Where can people follow you to keep up with your updates?
Well, I'm a basket case with technology, and I don't do social media. So
That's probably good for your mental health.
Yeah.
it also gives me some time to work. I mean, everybody that's on Facebook 3 hours a day, Florida Friday. So I'm
All right.
my books are all available at Amazon.
So maybe they should just follow your author page on Amazon.
Your author page on Amazon.
They can right, then they'll know where to find you and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm easy to find, just not on Facebook.
Awesome.
Love that.
Anybody who's a professor at a university is easy to find.
Well, there you go.
Fair enough. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
Final words of wisdom. Be like the boys. Be yourself. Truth, beauty, love, freedom. Go for it.
Bravo.
That right there.
We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Richard D. Mohr for joining us today. Richard, thank you so very much.
Great to have been here.
We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators, so if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
What's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.